real legs changing to columns, tapered columns. You notice things like this. Here's the form of the curves in the mirror, and here are classical curve. So it's still curved, but it's a different kind of curve. And mirrors set in over the mantelpiece. And this another room also that you saw. Now this one's a lot busier. It's still a very neoclassical room. This table was just put there by the Met, if it's still there, because this is a Rococo table. And they wouldn't have a piece like this dressing table in the middle of the floor. They're showing it off, because one of the things that came in at this time for general interest was more movable pieces of furniture. They were very fond of this would close and open. And the other thing that I didn't say, with this, you see the same color scheme. When the French went from Rococo to neoclassical, they kept the pastel colorations. And the furniture straightened out. Classical columns, sometimes twisted, sometimes a little bit carved, but it's a column always tapered. And here, very squared off in the case pieces. Marquetry, applied ornaments still, but the silhouettes change. Now, you wouldn't have, I should have put on an oval back or something. So the back of the chair didn't necessarily always square off. But you saw the legs. You really only have to look at the legs in French furniture to see where you are. Now, the next era that we get to was the Empire style, where you become very explicitly classical. You're not just being inspired by elements of classicism, you're copying the classical forms and the very, very pronounced ornament. Yes?
I'm sorry, the neoclassical, the earlier neoclassical, does it always have fluting in the legs? The French?
Most of the time, no, I know what you meant. Most of the time, but not always. This leg is fluted. This one, you can't really see it. This one has just little strips of gold. But it will always be tapered. So these legs are square.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
Yeah.
Like in the picture before, is all these
Urns?
No,
Panels.
like the round and with the leaves on top of it. Is it part of the neoclassical?
They are, the ornament is all neoclassical.
Is it like the one with the leaf, like above the mirror, the sides, like
This?
Yes.
These are swags. Sure.
Yeah,
This
but
is,
I know. Is this a specific neoclassical?
swags are. Swags and cartouche. A cartouche is the frame. The swags and the festoons are specifically neoclassical. The swag is drapery, the festoon is fruit, and flowers. Yep, and they are part of why they're symmetrical. Now, once in a while, you'll see elements that are sort of like that. In Rococo, you won't have them as even. You'll have, a swag with a shorter side on one side than another, an irregular drape. These are urns with lots of stuff around them. But every element of ornament is symmetrical. This is something that's called a trophy, which is symmetrical. It's hanging from either a shield or a ribbon. A trophy is what you get, you conquer the enemy and you collect trophies. But this particular thing is, I've seen a trophy of musical instruments, there'll be a trophy of flowers, and it usually goes in a corner. You'll see those very often in ornament. But again, we're getting to stronger colors now. As I said, more pronounced neoclassical forms, stronger colors, larger expanses of wood. Just as we saw in American Empire, but not nearly as American Empire is far simpler. Percier and Fontaine are the names you should know. They were Napoleon's architects who became infatuated with Egyptian style and brought back their ideas for Egyptian elements and did a pattern book, which people copied. And this is, the military ornament that, remember, I told you exists in honor of Napoleon. So instead of X space with animal or with what I had something with duckbills, this one has crossed swords. And this is just where the chaise became popularized. This is the original form of the French chaise, the chaise longue, which had a high back, a high foot. But this originally came from the Roman classical couch. But here, the famous music room at Malmaison, strong colors, the X-space stool, the darker wood, in this case, lacquered ebony. You can't really see it very clearly, but they're not, the Clismos chair isn't exactly like a Clismos. It has the suggestion of saber legs and the curve of the back. This is one of the interiors to just recognize its interior. Now, if you're stuck and can't remember what it is, you look, you think it's bright colors. It's got the tented room, which suggests the expedition into Egypt. Not a real oculus, but the suggestion of it. It has the bed that is clearly inspired by classicism. We have this tripod table that we saw all the way back in Egypt. So you would guess that it was an up-here interior.
What about the swan?
Oh, the swan, good point. The swan is Josephine's symbol. So if you remember that, that's a clue to exactly what this is. I would rather, in terms of what you try and memorize, well, recognize the interior, but if you can't, don't think about the swan as much as you're going to think about all of the elements of it. So that if you memorize the swan, remember, the swan will only tell you if Josephine owned it, just as the sun will tell you if it was made for Louis XIV. What's more important is first think of the elements that any interior of the period would have. I'm comparing this one, or I'm showing it with Thomas Hope, the English Regency parallel style. French Empire, English Regency, American Empire. They were almost at the same time. They took inspiration from the same places. They translated them slightly differently, but they were all sort of substantial elements. A lot, you saw gold and black, but here it's more applied, jazzier, well, not jazzier, much heavier. This one is painted black and gold. The American we saw the Hugh Finlay piece, has a similar shape, simplified. And that's one of the things you see more elaborate, not always, but tendency to more elaborate, a little less elaborate, still less elaborate.